Africa. We are based in Addis Ababa, and it's a pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar. Mr. Stéphane Oduor, Investment Secretary at the Ministry of Trade and Industry from Kenya, CEO, Namibia Investment Promotion Board, Mrs. Nangula Nelulu, CEO of Lesotho National Development Council, Mr. Maurice Lamail. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again, and thank you so much for joining this webinar. So the World Investment Report actually supports policymakers by monitoring global and regional investment trend. It's a very, very important tool specifically for trade promotion organization as well as investment promotion organizations, because it provides an overview of the global FDI trends, and therefore it's become very easier for those institutions to plan accordingly based on tangible statistics. So the 2024 report document we are discussing today mainly showed how global investment trends are performing, specifically during this period where we are facing continuous crisis at regional level and even at global level. So those crises affected investment trends. Therefore, in 2023, the investment trend declined by 2%, which means there were 1.3 trillion. And specifically for Africa, there was also a decline in FDI trend of 3%. So for today's webinar, we shall deliberate on the report and specifically focusing on Africa, because that report analyzed quite numbers of African countries, including Burundi, Kenya, Benin, Mali, and Togo. So it shows how those countries made efforts in terms of introducing digital tools in their investment promotion activities, specifically in some areas such as pharmaceutical and the special economic zones. So digital tools are very important when it comes to investment promotion, because many African countries have introduced online business registrations facilities to promote their investment and to make easier for investors to easily register and started businesses in their respective countries. We have seen also in quite numbers of countries where they created a one-stop center for investment registration. All those efforts aimed at making easier the investment registration, the doing business in those respective countries. So without taking too long, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite Stéphane Oduor, the Investment Secretary, for his opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me start by standing on the protocols already set by Diana Sainzonga. I want to start by giving an apology from the Cabinet Secretary, Ms. Rebecca Miano, who is the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Investments, Trade and Industry. I'll be reading her speech. So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the launch of the World Investment Report. This report, a cornerstone in the analysis of global investment trends, provides invaluable insights into the shifting dynamics of international investment and its profound impact on our global economy. First and foremost, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all the contributors, analysts, and experts whose dedication and meticulous work have made this report possible. Your commitment to providing accurate and comprehensive data is crucial for informing policy decisions and fostering sustainable development worldwide. Special thanks to the dedicated team at UNCTAD for their significant contributions to this comprehensive report. The World Investment Report is an essential resource for understanding the current state and future direction of global investment flows. As we navigate a complex global economic landscape, this report provides invaluable insights into the trends, challenges, and opportunities that lie ahead. The 2024 report highlights several key themes related to global investment trends and sustainable development, some of which we'll get into detail very shortly. But just to mention a few, in terms of number one, decline in global FDI, as already mentioned by Diana, global foreign direct investments fell by 2% to US dollars 1.3 trillion in 2023, primarily due to the global crises such as the war in Ukraine, high energy prices, and rising public debt. However, there was a notable increase in greenfield investment project announcements, particularly in electronics, semiconductors, automotive, and renewable energy sectors. With regard to sustainable development goals, the report emphasizes a significant widening of the investment gap in developing countries, which has grown to US dollars 4 trillion annually. Despite increased investments in renewable energy since 2015, most funds have gone to the developed countries, leaving developing nations with substantial unmet needs. With regards to the need for renewable energy investments, developing countries require about US $1.7 trillion annually for renewable energy investments, but only attracted US $5.4 billion in 2022, according to the report. The report calls for enhanced support and financing mechanisms to bridge this gap. With regard to sustainable financial growth, the sustainable finance market grew by over 10% to US $5.8 trillion in 2022. Sustainable bond issuance has increased fivefold over the past 5 years, highlighting a growing commitment to climate actions among institutional investors, including sovereign wealth and public pension funds. With regard to policy recommendations, the report proposes a global action compact for investment in sustainable energy for all, which includes national investment policies, customized investment promotion mechanisms, and strengthened capacities of investment promotion institutions. It also stresses the need for reforming the international investment agreement regime to support the energy transition. These themes underscore the urgency of addressing investment gaps in developing countries, particularly in the context of sustainable energy and achieving the SDGs. As we navigate the complexities of climate change, social inequalities, and technology advancements, it is imperative that our investment strategies align with the principle of sustainability and inclusivity. The report provides valuable recommendations on how we can leverage investment to drive green growth, create decent jobs, and promote equitable development. In terms of implication and opportunities, these findings have profound implications for policymakers, investors, and businesses worldwide. They highlight the need for, number one, enhanced policy frameworks to attract and retain investment, especially in emerging and frontier markets. Number two, innovation and technology to drive growth and address global challenges such as climate change and inequalities. And number three, collaboration and partnerships to foster a conducive environment for sustainable development and inclusive growth. Turning to Kenya's experience, the report highlights Kenya's experience in integrating digital tools for investment promotion and facilitation. Building on its extensive experience in developing digital tools for business and investment procedures, UNCTAD has developed a model trade information portal. This online tool aims to enhance transparency and assist traders by simplifying the completion of international trade procedures. First launched in Kenya in 2017, the portal has proven effective, enabling traders to significantly reduce both the time and cost associated with accessing information about clearance procedures. By 2022, the National Trade Facilitation Committee of Kenya had simplified numerous procedures through the portal, eliminating unnecessary steps and required documents while moving several processes online. Kenya's approach and current global trends in digital governance and investments are influencing Kenya's economic landscape. We hope these insights will enrich the discussions while showcasing Kenya's best practices and experiences already detailed in the report. As previously noted, foreign direct investment inflows to Africa increased by 3% in 2023, totaling $53 billion. Of particular concern is a 50% decline in the estimated value of international project finance deals in Africa, which in 2023 had a 20% drop from 2022. Most investments relevant to sustainable development goals are in infrastructure sectors, which are significantly affected by the global decline in international project finance as witnessed in 2023. FDI to Kenya in the year 2023 remained relatively stable, declining slightly by 6% to approximately $1.5 billion. Announced greenfield investments, which are crucial for industrial productivity, more than tripled to nearly $7.9 billion, half of which amount directed towards constructing renewable energy facilities. Almost 2/3 of these announced projects are aimed at establishing business and professional services, including software programming, research and development activities, as well as sales and marketing offices. With regard to facilitating sustainable development, in this challenging environment, facilitating sustainable investment by removing ground-level obstacles and providing a transparent, streamlined investment climate is a priority for all countries. For example, with the support of UNCTAD, the Kenya Investment Single Window Project aims to introduce an online system to streamline the investment process in the country, in Kenya, and enhance the government's capacity to attract and monitor investments effectively. This system will connect with the existing government databases, such as the eCitizen portal, the Kenya Revenue Authority's iTech system, and the county government portals. This integration will enhance the functionality of existing platforms, making it easier for businesses to navigate the regulatory environment. In terms of call to action, as we launch the World Investment Report 2024, I encourage all stakeholders, governments, businesses, and civil society to engage with its findings and collaborate in implementing its recommendations. Together, we can create a more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable global economy. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the World Investment Report 2024 is more than just a compilation of data and analysis. It is a call to action. As we reflect on these insights, let us commit to fostering an investment climate that is inclusive, sustainable, and resilient. I would like to thank everyone involved in the production of the report and who are present here today. Let us use the insights gained from this report to guide our actions and investments towards a prosperous and sustainable future. I appreciate your participation and support, and I look forward to the discussions and collaborations that will follow this launch. It is now my distinct honor to officially unveil the World Investment Report. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stephan Odua, for the opening remarks for our workshop. And thank you also for sharing Kenya's experience in terms of introducing digital tools to facilitate investment promotion in Kenya, as well as for highlighting some of the initiatives you are jointly implementing with UNCTAD. So next, we are now going to give the floor to my colleague, Ameria. She's the Chief of Investment Issues Analysis Section at UNCTAD. So Ameria, she's going to give us a presentation of the World Investment Report 2024. So over to you, Ameria.
Good morning, distinguished speakers, dear participants, dear colleagues from the Africa Office of the UN Trade and Development. Many thanks for organizing this regional launch of the World Investment Report. Many thanks to Mr. Oldwa from the State Department for Investment Promotion, the Ministry of Investment and Trade and Industry of Kenya for the excellent introduction and overview of the issues. And as my colleague said, for bringing in the Kenya experience, which, by the way, we reflect in the theme chapter of the report. We have only 1 hour. I'll try to walk you through all the trends, all the different analysis that, as usual, the World Investment Report in relation to the global foreign direct investment in sustainable development goals. But importantly, this year, the focus, the theme of the report is the importance of investment facilitation for digital government and for investment attraction. But more than investment attraction is how it impacts the overall business environment, both for domestic enterprises and for multinational enterprises operating in developing countries. I will bring you some examples from Africa. I will try to keep to time so we can give time to our distinguished panelists to share their experience and to discuss with us. To start with, just a quick structure of my presentation. I will go through the trends. I will dive in on trends for Africa. I will present some policy trends. And finally, I will go into the theme of the report. And I look forward to a rich discussion after my presentation. So to start with, the general message when it comes to trends of the report is that global FDI flows decline in 2023. And mostly this is due because investors' uncertainty about the state of the global economy. We know we are still going through difficult global times, challenging fragmentations and so on. So this is reflected in the different types of FDI trends that we analyze. As you know, every year in the report, we look at FDI, that is value of investment flows. It comes from balance of payment statistics that we collect from central banks in different countries. We also present the international project finance, which is important projects that mostly go to big infrastructure sectors, and which is key for the SDGs. We look at cross-border mergers and acquisitions, which is mostly linked to financial activities, and then greenfield projects, which are crucial for productive capacity investment. So basically, we see that global FDI decreased by 2% to 1.3 trillion. This is the headline message of the report. These figures was affected by big swings in financial flows from what we call a small conduit, transit European economies. And if we exclude these financial flows, if we focus only on what will be real productive investment, the decline will have been more than 10%. So this is important to keep in mind. So basically, the global environment for FDI remains challenging in 2024. There are weakening growth prospects in the global economy, economic fracturing trends, as I said, because geopolitical tension and trade and geopolitical tensions. And so this has led to a global sort of reshaping of FDI patterns, and leading to some multinational enterprises to adopt what we call a cautious approach towards expansion. So the greenfield, just to summarize here, we see that FDI decreased 2%, This is including conduit. Without conduit, it would have been 10%. Then international project finance, which is crucial for sustainable development goals related investment, declined by 23%, which has an important impact in Africa because Africa recently has been attracting important projects on IPF, especially for the sustainable infrastructure and the renewable energies. A decline, the 40% in global, in cross-border mergers and acquisitions, which, as I said, are linked to financial conditions and macroeconomic tightening. And then greenfield projects, which is the bright spot, observe an increase of 2%, which is good news. Because this, as I already mentioned, is important for investment in productive sectors. Then moving on to what happens in different regions of the world. Here we can see that in developed economies, financial transactions by multinational enterprises led to very high volatility in FDI. And this financial volatility is reflected in the M&As that I just mentioned. So I already explained the difference if we include conduits economy or not. When we look at developing countries, FDI flows to these economies decreased by 7% to 867 billion. Having said that, and despite the bleakness of this decrease, FDI in the developing countries still represents 65% of global flows. Looking at different developing regions, developing Asia, the largest recipient of FDI, experienced an 8% decline in inflows. I mean, as we know, developing Asia is considered the manufacturing hub of the world and still experienced an 8% decline, which is driving the overall decline in developing countries. Inflows to Africa dropped by 3%, while in Latin America and the Caribbean remained flat and mostly concentrated in few large resource-rich economies and some small Caribbean countries. Moving on, and as I said, we pay a lot of attention to what happened in terms of projects. What are the projects where investors are going? And a key indicator of this is the greenfield projects, that is investment in new plants, in new infrastructure. So here we see that the recent pickup in the announcement of new projects, the announcement of greenfield projects in developing countries, follows a long period of sluggishness, as we said in the report. And this signals a potential recovery. We see the the yellow line. We see here the share of developing country in global greenfield projects increasing, which is a sign of good news. So now developing countries account for 40% of greenfield projects announcements in the world, which is a positive sign. And the 2% increase also gives hopes to what is the attraction of foreign direct investment projects for in productive sectors, including especially manufacturing. So I'll move on quickly, conscious of time, to discuss some trends in Africa. Mr. Odwan in his introduction mentioned some important numbers, and just to give you some indications of what is going on in the region. As I said earlier, FDI's inflows to Africa declined by 3% in 2023. So basically, if we look at it in comparison to what happened in 2022, flows remain flat to 53 billion. We can see here, going a bit backwards in time, the recovery post-COVID, and the recent decline to the global factors that I mentioned earlier on, linked to geopolitical tensions and to cautiousness of investors given the uncertainty in global markets. As I said, this is balance of payment data flows, and it's important also to look what happened at the level of project activities. So now this is the FDI flows to Africa, disaggregated by sub-regions. So we can see the difference, and largest decline in North Africa, followed by Central Africa, and the bright spot here is Southern Africa. Basically, there are some important messages behind these flows that link to the sectoral level data, and we see in the report, and I invite you to read chapter 1 and the online regional chapter, the region still attracts a growing share of mega projects, of global mega projects, and only 6 of them are valued to at more than 5 billion. So the largest announcement, for example, in the region in 2023, in terms of greenfield project, was a hydrogen project in Mauritania. As I said, the region is attracting a lot of projects for the energy transition, and later on I'll tell you more what the division is doing to help countries towards that. So this accounts to several multiples of the country's gross domestic product. So this is a very big project. Then when we look at Southern Africa, 3 energy producers separately announced green hydrogen projects in South Africa, amounting to 7.1 billion. And there was also, looking back to North Africa, despite the decline, there was significant investment in Morocco as well. So all in all, there are separate big mega projects that drive the trend, still very concentrated in some countries. In Egypt, for example, there was also another green hydrogen production totaling $4 billion. So overall message is that yes, there is a significant attraction of mega projects concentrated in some countries, but it's a bright spot. It's a light in the middle of all the decline in terms of the investment in the energy transition, especially to help countries in their quest to achieve the Paris Agreement goals. Just moving on quickly to who are investing, still European investors remain the largest investors in Africa. Here they are ranked the top 10, mostly Netherlands, France, and UK from European region, and of course US is on 3rd rank. So the 2/3 of the 4 spots, as I said, are held by the Netherlands, UK, and France. And if we look, I mean, we in the report spend the details where this investment goes, which sectors, and so the largest year-to-year increase that we saw in the region was in projects related to chemicals, electronics, and electricity. Although this drop compared to 2022. So basically, this drop alone that we saw in electricity and gas supply projects explain the decline in greenfield projects. So again, I invite you to read the report with all the richness of information. Fortunately, I have to move on because I want to cover other issues related to policy and also to the main findings of the report. Since 2019-2020, our division has been called by General Assembly resolution to analyze and report about investment in sustainable development goals. So we saw the drop in international project finance on the earlier figure, and this has exacerbated the gap that we have estimated at 4 trillion gap in investment needed to achieve the sustainable development goals. International project finance is a key source for SDG related investment. We see that several projects, several SDGs investment sectors experience a decline. So this is worrying because we are, I mean, the deadline for the 2030 development agenda is tomorrow. We are in 2024, just 6 years up to the agenda. So we see in the report, we show that between 2015 and 2030, the overall number of projects in goals relevant to SDG sectors grew. But when we look at last year, the picture is different, and there was mostly a decline in renewable energy, again, explained by decline in international project finance, but also in water and sanitation, there was a decline of 17%. In last year report and the year before, we did an analysis of why some sectors attract more than others, and the sectors related to adaptation are linked to more institutional and governance issues that prevent investors to go to center countries. Still, mitigation-related sectors like renewable energy and infrastructure attract more than 3/4 of international project investment. So this is an issue of concern that we have to analyze. Then we also look at the different shares by regions in terms of attraction of investment related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And we see an unequal distribution. Still, developing countries in Asia attract the lion's share of SDG-related investment. Africa remains as one of the most underserved regions, and its share of international projects, not only in SDGs, but also in total investment projects, remains low. But as I said, there are bright spots because some countries in the continent are attracting sizable investment in power, infrastructure, and in renewable energy. I would love to stay here more, but I really need to move on. And now I'm going to discuss some issues related to investment policy trends, because as you know, investment, yes, there is the market-seeking motive, the resource-seeking motive, but all this is driven by national policies and in the international policy environment that investment is governed by. So as every year in the report, we look at policy trends in developing countries, and as we say here in this figure, developing countries continue to prioritize investment attraction, and this is reflected in a larger percentage of positive policy measures towards investment. So if you see in developing countries, the proportion of policies more favorable to investors has remained stable and above 80% since 2014. And in contrast, developed countries represent half and 2/3 of the total in the mid-2010s, and started to decline, especially because of protective policy measures introduced around the pandemic. So we show in this figure that they reached at all times 17% in 2020 and have stabilized at around 40%, these measures in developed countries. So basically the message here is that developing countries are remaining open when it comes to the strategies and favorable that are favorable to investors when it comes to national investment policies. Looking here now at what in terms Africa, I mean, looking at regional disaggregation, we see that Africa and developing Asia adopted the most investment policy measures in 2023. And these, again, were more favorable. If we look at Africa, there were 34 measures favorable to investment compared to only 4. And compared to other developing regions, it was one of the largest number of positive, most favorable investment policy measures, which is a good news. We need to promote a reliable investment environment for investors. Then moving on, we also, as I said, we also look at agreements in what is the regime of international investment agreements and international investment treaties. This is an area where UNCTAD has been supporting developing countries. As we know, for trade, the world has the WTO, which manages multilateralism and the policy making in terms of trade. The environment for international investment treaties is different and requires, in terms of developing countries and least developed countries, a lot of support to modernize their treaty regimes. So we saw that in 2023, countries and regional organizations concluded at least 20 new international investment agreements and 12 investment treaties, bilateral investment treaties. And there were 70 treaties with investment provisions, what we call TIPS. This brought the whole universe of investment agreement in force to over 2,600. And as I said, we continue supporting developing countries to reform the old generation investment treaties because the world economy has changed, the renewed considerations for sustainable development and also the renewable energy require and modern tools for countries to protect the right to regulate and also to give the investors the space they require to invest in different countries. With this, I will move to our sustainable finance trends. As you know, we have chapter 1 covers what is downstream investment, flows and projects, and then chapter 3 focuses on sustainable finance trends, that is capital markets, institutional investment, and so on. In the chapter, we show that the sustainable finance markets continues to grow. In 2023, the sustainable investment products, which covers both bonds and funds, reached more than 7 trillion, and it increased by 20% in 2022. I will walk you quickly through this because I want to spend 5 minutes at least on so here we show that the cumulative issuance of bonds since 2018 is 4 trillion. And if you recall, I mentioned that the gap to meet the SDGs is 4 trillion. So there is a lot of money, a lot of resources flowing in the capital markets, but this is not making it to developing countries. Still, over 80% of sustainable bond markets and sustainability funds instruments remain in developed countries, mostly Europe and the US. I'll move quickly because we also analyze the policy side of things in terms of disclosure and all the economic social governance or corporate social responsibility. One issue that we keep emphasizing is the problem of greenwashing. Only 20% of green funds portfolios are exposed to climate positive assets. There is a lot of self-reporting, self-ranking, and this is an issue that is of great importance not only for UNCTAD but for the UN. Now, let me move very quickly to the core of the report. If the moderator gives me 5 minutes, I think this is a very important report because we keep analyzing why investment is low, why it is declining, why it doesn't fly to different to some countries, especially vulnerable ones. So we show in the report that business and investment facilitation have become central to the efforts to develop the private sector in developing countries and to attract FDI. And what this requires, and these efforts in terms of investment facilitation include providing information to investors, making rules and regulations transparent, and streamlining administrative procedures. And in streamlining, we focus all of effort in analyzing the trends in terms of information portals and single windows, and I will show you some data to that. Just quickly to show you some statistics, we analyze different investors and different business surveys, and the top 3 services that are the starting points for digital government and investment facilitation, and they are the most required by investor by a margin, are business registration, business licenses, and being able to tax files online. So these are the 3 top demands of investors, and if you can provide that online in a reliable, easy, and inexpensive way, that brings country a long way when it comes to attracting investment. So we analyze in the report. So moving on, we show that investment facilitation portals are growing in number and quality, especially in developing countries. Here, the circles reflect the increase in quality. The quality is a rank from 1 to 10 based in the digital, in our global enterprise registration GR code that was launched in 2016 to help developing countries develop the portals and single windows. So we see that the quality in developing countries increased marginally, but the number of portals increased significantly. When we look at single windows, the quality, there was a jump in quality as well as in numbers. And And I think this is important because, as I said, many countries are streamlining business procedures, adopting online application systems, reinforcing what they call the one-stop shops, one-stop centers, adopting online application systems, reinforcing what is all the support and digital tools provided to investors. We have developed some of these portals as part of our technical assistance projects in Africa. We'll mention some examples now. But the good news is that in developing countries and LDC, some countries are leapfrogging in terms of the services they are providing. I will skip this graph quickly, but I want to give you some example. So here we see that developing countries are making an effort to make the single window more accessible to foreign investors. And this is even more when we compare developing countries with developed countries. And for example, in LDCs, also there is, when we look at developing countries, in 39% are fully accessible to foreign investors, 25% in LDCs. I just want to give you some examples. We analyzed some countries where we have provided technical assistance. For example, in November 2022, the Burundi Development Agency introduced a digital platform designed to simplify the process of starting a business. This led to an increase in what is the rate of business creation, employment, and so on. I have other examples in the report, like Kenya, Mali, Togo. I invite you really to read the report. I'm sorry I don't have more time. In addition to looking at the trends, which we analyze based in the update of the GER.co ranking, but also in surveys that we do every year of investment promotion agencies, we look what is the impact, what do we gain from this? Before I go into that, just to make you to mention a policy issue is that digital governments are increasingly common in investment facilitation policies. It's not general investment facilitation per se, but there are three issues that are more present in developing countries, and there is transparency, streamlining, and facilitation services. I'll move quickly from the policy side to go to the impact. So what did we do? We look at what is the impact of digital government in investment facilitation. So here we have 4 quartiles of quality of what is the online single windows and investment facilitation, digital investment facilitation. So top is the best ranking for the bottom. So we see that here that digital investment facilitation is associated with higher institutional quality. Countries in the top quartile, and this is linked to all the issue of transparency and also how these countries have managed to integrate streamlined procedures. Then the other correlation that we did, it was to look at how digital investment facilitation is associated with higher rates of investment creation. Unfortunately, here in the top quartile, we see a lower number because these are mostly LDCs, which have excellent single windows, countries that we have assisted in developing the windows, but they don't attract as much investment as other countries. Having said that, for example, as I said, in Burundi, since the launch, registrations have increased by 59%. In Kenya, investment single window project, also supported by us, had also important outcomes. Investment Promotion Agency of Benin also had, for example, a high increase in business registrations and new business creation. And half of those businesses are owned by women. It's an important finding. And and also more than half are under the age of 30 years old and are located in rural areas. So the development impact is very clear. Also, Mali has launched a pioneering online pharmaceutical registry, which shows that you can move beyond traditional investment facilitation areas to new areas like the pharmaceutical registry, which allows the sector to develop faster and allow foreign investors to operate in the sector in a more efficient and faster way. And finally, there is the impact on investment. As I said, this is not automatic. I mean, this is facilitation is just part of the overall institutional framework. Having said that, we see that it has an important impact. There is an important correlation between quality and the attraction of investment. Again, the top quartile contains all those least developed countries that we have assisted that have excellent portals and single windows, but they have a lower share of investment attraction. But we show a positive impact that was matter, and I will summarize this in this graph. So basically, countries with better digital government solutions have higher rates of business creation, higher institutional quality, which is key. Investors want transparency and want to be able to operate and register the business in a low cost as possible. And then we did a very thorough technical analysis with controlling for income level, development status, and other key determinants. And we saw that on average, having these digital facilitation tools, if you have each additional point of quality in what is your score of single windows and information portals, this score is associated with 8% more FDI. This number is in line with previous studies done by the World Bank and the IMF that shows a sizable increase of investment FDI in the countries. I will just summarize then what are the main policy steps that we recommend in the report. I mean, we every year try to provide tangible policy roadmaps to developing countries, policymakers, and to stakeholders and international community. So basically, we show in numbers and in analysis that developing countries are at advantage in establishing and improving digital government tools. It is clear in terms of business creation, investment attraction, and the overall institutional environment. But governments need to adopt a comprehensive approach to digital investment facilitation, and not a dedicated process only to authorize investment. We have in countries like Colombia, we already have a registry for companies to record their emissions to comply with the Paris Agreement. And then we show the case of the pharmaceutical in Africa. So we can have a broader comprehensive approach. And then finally, international investment agreements can be catalyst for investment facilitation, not only for investment facilitation in general, but also for developing digital tools for those purposes, because some of these issues have to be regulated. Then I will conclude here but I'm happy to answer any question and to discuss some of any doubts you might have. I just want to let you know that we are not stopping here with this report. We will continue working with countries, with partners, providing technical assistance on key issues related to investment and sustainable development, assistance to central banks and other agencies in terms of FDI statistics. We will continue working through the Global Enterprise Registration Program. We have many projects in Africa ongoing, and we hope to continue. And we also have started a new project. It's a 3-year project funded by UN regular budget on attracting finance and an investment for the energy transition in Africa. This is implemented with other agencies, including UNDESA, the UN Economic Commission for Africa, and the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. And this, we are working with 5 pilot countries, Ethiopia, Malawi, Namibia, Seychelles, and Tanzania, to implement climate change and energy transition strategies by mobilizing finance and investment in renewable energy. And this all is based in all our thorough analysis in WR 2023 and our continuous analysis of trends and policies in developing countries. Let me stop here to respect the time of the panelists, and thank you so much for listening to me. Diane, over to you.
Thank you so much, Amelia, for the very nice presentation, where we really had a lot of information specifically on the investment trend. And the key messages here is that investment trend declined in general, but there are significant attraction of mega projects, specifically in energy transition sector. So the next session on this webinar is going to be a panel discussion, and the panel will be moderated by my colleague Judith Ameso. Again, let me mention that the full report is also available on UNCTAD website. And in the chat, there is also a link where you can access the full report for more details. So over to you, Judith, for the next session.
Thank you very much, Diane. Good morning or good afternoon, participants, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you very much for joining this webinar discussing the World Investment Report 2024. This webinar was supposed to be for 1 hour, but I already see we're short on time, so I will request if we could extend by about 30 minutes to really give us an opportunity to listen to the panelists and also open up the floor for questions and answers. And speaking of questions, we already have some questions in the chat box, and I'll ask Amelia and colleagues if they can begin to respond to that while we go through the panel session. So joining our panel this morning, we have two panelists, Mr. Molise Ramaile, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Lesotho National Development Council. You're welcome, Mr. Molise. And we also have Ms. Nangula, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board. You're welcome, Ms. Nangula. Mr. Molise and Ms. Nangula, are you there?
We are here. Can you hear me?
Okay, great.
Thank you,
great.
Judith.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'll start with Mr. Molise. The report shows that FDI flows in Africa have been fluctuating since 2015. And this year, the flows in Africa declined by 3%. We have now passed the midway point of the SDGs, and we have seen that most of the SDGs are off track or they have stagnated in the face of multiple crises. What initiatives can African countries implement to attract FDI in the context of the SDGs framework and the climate agendas? Over to you, Mr. Molise.
Thank you very much, Judith. To open my video here. I don't know if you can see me.
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you well as well.
Oh, okay, thank you. So we talk about as Africa. Initially, FDI was just for economic prosperity of our countries. It's not a bone of contention in a country that economic growth. Now we have seen our economy and the world at large. FDI are just considering growth, but there are other considerations. One of the key considerations that I believe very important, sure that we look at environmental and as well as social issues when we talk about FDI. We have seen that have passed that would come to Africa, and then ultimately sustainable growth in this. There are issues that affect them, which are in our African countries. For ultimately, we do something to that effect. FDI goes, the outlook that we see as Lesotho and Africa is that we should have consideration of issues such as sustainability. What I mean when I'm of sustainability is that as African countries, opportunity to chart when you talk about FDI. African countries, makers should look at high quality FDI, the sense of looking at issues in FDI. I mean by this, speakers who came before me, Amelia, did mention issues such as climate change. Now, have a look at how we incorporate FDI to support smart and sustainable agriculture. We should that we combat as one of our, and which climate change is affecting our economies, and therefore generated by fossil fuels, renewable energy should be there. So we should ensure that sustainability in our countries. Second, African nations should operate FDI's inflow, like I said, into cleaner areas to ensure long-term development. And clean tech, because we know that in countries we are endowed abundant water, endowed with abundant energy resources, continent. So we should look at renewable power, wind energy, solar energy. So sustainability really should be when we talk about bringing time. Another issue, very imperative, bringing FDI and sustainability, that we do not discard the importance of the domestic investor countries. Domestic should part FDI in order what we call, we want to ensure companies that operate together create jobs. We don't want as provide jobs. FDI should bring in the requisite, but bring in to the local sector to ensure that we get the requisite skills. Should be a skills transfer process that is undertaken to countries. Maybe just to sum up, as African countries, we're also on ESG principles. There's no better way to drive sustainability at the core of our policy making. So one, we are also green energies, which we know they are very investment intensive. We should financial instruments in our different countries to drive development of these particular. We are saying as we should have dedicated investment instruments that to ensure that we fund that we are focusing on. Importantly, as I mentioned, energy, climate motives as one of the can focus on things. As we're also looking at agriculture, ensuring that greenhouses to promote the issue of. So to wrap up what I'm trying to say, that FDI is important, but we have an opportunity in African countries to say FDI that is being attracted is based on our national strategic development plans, which are focusing on sustainability and driving the transition to renewable energy in order to ensure that we in the issue of change in our continent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Molise. Your connection was a little bit patchy there, but if you could just check that while I move over to Ms. Nangola. And thank you very much for highlighting some of the interventions there, and the last part where you said the FDI that is being attracted, that should be attracted in Africa should be based on the national plans that are also based on the Sustainable Development Agenda. So Ms. Nangola, I'll come to you again with a question around the climate and green energy transition issues. Namibia has recently embarked on a major investment drive in the energy and industrial sector with an ambitious goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 91% by the year 2030 and to become the sustainable energy capital of Africa. What measures is the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board implementing to mobilize capital and bridge the funding gaps for this climate transition?
Thank you very much, Judith, for the question and for the opportunity to participate. Of course, NIPDB, which is the Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board, is a government agency in the Office of the President, and we are the implementers, of course, of government's vision when it comes to investment. But what Namibia is doing, and for which we are playing as a coordinating and supportive role, we have realized, of course, that Namibia is endowed with significant energy resources. whether it is, of course, oil and gas that is found, and we know that is not what is green, that is what we are trying to replace. But gas, when we talk about energy in Africa, we believe that gas will still continue to play a significant role in energy transition in Africa. So, and then of course, it is the abundant solar resources, wind resources, biomass, a little bit of hydro, and of course, then between the wind and the solar and the water that we have, we believe that we have got significant potential to produce green hydrogen at unparalleled or very much competitive rates. And we are probably one of the top 5 countries in the world with the capacity to do so. And therefore, what we're then doing is, like your question specifically, to attract capital. Because one of the reasons why green hydrogen is going slower than it should is because, of course, the technology development that is required and the price that cannot still compete with the price of producing fossil fuel. But what Namibia did is, number one, of course, is about clarity of vision and leadership. And that was the vision of our late president, starting already in 2020. And yes, this is probably going back earlier to 2015 when we made our own global commitment. And therefore, yes, we are trying, of course, to meet our own commitment, but also making sure that we exploit our resources in a manner that can support other people to reach their commitment. So the clarity of vision and leadership as to what we want to do, why, and so forth, is important. And then it comes to about an enabling policy, governance, and coordination. And what the president did is really appointed a committee, what you call a green hydrogen or renewable energy committee, that is an interministerial, that is really got the relevant stakeholders, and that is purposeful. And he also supported with a green hydrogen program that is specifically driving our green hydrogen strategy. And then the coordination that comes, which NIPDB is supporting, to make sure that on the ground, when it comes to investment, we are coordinating. And then number 3 is really about,
what is the total value of the item?
I don't know if Mr. Ndunge can
from source, the household, the past 12 months.
Is the host able to mute Gladys Ndunge?
Yes, we'll ask the host to mute.
Please. Thank you. Then, of course, number 3 is about strategic partnerships. Namibia, our economy is small, and the project, so just one project that we are talking about, is almost the same size as our GDP. And therefore, we will not be able to fund that on our own. We will not be able to consume everything that we are producing, and therefore strategic partnerships with those that are potential consumers of what we will produce, especially looking at Europeans, looking at Korea, Japan. They are not in the position to meet their own decarbonization target, especially when it comes to green hydrogen and replacement for fossil fuel, and therefore we need strategic partnerships. And with those partnerships, of course, funding will flow. Other people that cannot meet their own target, although they might not be our main target, and then owners of capital. So strategic partnerships is important. And therefore, NIPDB is coordinating, supporting government in playing a role to form and facilitate these strategic partnerships. And then it's about having necessary instruments. Investors are looking for projects. I think it was mentioned earlier. So yes, greenfield investment, but just to say, okay, here is environment, come, they will not necessarily come. And what the government therefore did is really, we demarcated an area in Namibia, and we said, this is the valleys, the way we want to produce green hydrogen, and this is where we want to implement our green industrialization strategy. We've got 3 valleys, central, north, south, and therefore it's really about being deliberate then. And then we implemented a fund, which we call SDG Namibia One Fund. And that is about government, yes, seeded it with capital, and then we are attracting other private and other forms of blended capital for people to invest in this fund, and this fund will then be used also to finance projects. And probably the last point that I can talk about is having enabling institutions, whether it's the Environment Investment Fund that receives support from government, whether it's the Green Hydrogen Program, whether it's the NIPDB, it's really to have those institutions that are supporting the various ministries, sectoral ministries, and the Office of the President to make sure that this is implemented. So those are really the 5 key focus areas that I think we did as a government to drive our agenda in greening the economy, whether it comes to renewable energy projects or green industrialization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nangula, for highlighting those 5 key areas, which also show strong commitment from the government and support and the role of the Namibia Investment Promotion Development Board. So I want to go back now to Mr. Molise and ask a question around the thematic chapter of the report. So, Mr. Molise, a robust digital governance architecture is critical in attracting and promoting FDI in countries, especially the least developed countries. How has the digital governance space in Lesotho evolved in the recent years in response to changing global business modes? And how can African countries specifically leverage digital tools and platforms such as the UNCTAD Digital Government Platform to promote inclusive development with a focus on women and youth who tend to be a segment of the population that are left behind?
Judith, respond without the video formed. Maybe it's affecting the connection. Is that in order?
That sounds better. We'll know as you talk more, so you can keep the video for now, but we can hear you well.
Thank you. So let me start pick on Lesotho, and we are making we have made significant with the cybersecurity, which is undergoing a discussion now, and as well as strategy framework, which is being concurrently with the bill. So to us, that is towards digitization, but there are various interventions as well which are being implemented by the country through partnerships with and partners. Some of the initiatives, they include, we have an e-government service delivery is on such a platform. We have nature solutions implemented, and these are more streamlined sector where there is a much more need for e-governance. We have also seen a movement in development of digital platforms provide public services online. You mentioned rightfully in your previous discussion, I think it was Amelia, where you spoke about having the business facilitation. We have seen this improve efficiency in terms of companies, whether it's been attracted or domestic investment. Registration of companies, it can be done. All the requisite licenses are approved and issued. We have also seen the introduction of visa platform, licensing system, and even from a perspective for efficiency purposes, we've seen online tax service such as tax undertaken, as well as filing and payments by our different companies. So these the utilization of these platforms have even improved his ranking in terms of efficiency in doing business. So the cost of doing business is considered in the ultimately low efficiency that have been online platforms. And I should highlight that we are also looking at ensuring that these are not just seen in one of the big business impediments that we have seen in countries is that be able to get these services, people living in rural areas have to towns in order services, but through the infrastructure that we have, even rural areas to get access to all of these. And we are ensuring, even in partnerships with the operators that are operating in country, whereby infrastructure such as towers bring countrywide coverage, all our businesses in the country. We are seeing a significant, so through collaboration with other government agencies, the Ministry of Local, we have district urban councils operating across the country, and some of them are even hosting data centers for e-governance systems, digitization, and all government services. And this is a huge improvement for us. Now, Africa as a whole may be trying to be specific to women and youth It's very important to highlight these platforms being driven at district level for some of our countries. They're allowing these women-led businesses as well as youth-led businesses to have a wider audience reach. And because we are talking about a private sector-led economy where we are even driving export of our goods, is when we talk about the number of people that we have. For example, Lesotho, the 2.1 million people, we want to expand. So through digital platforms, to even talk to other Africa to drive intra. South Africa is a neighbor to ourselves, 1 million people, the rest of, and talking about Africa under the African Free Trade Area, even international. So access to markets to us, and also even access to systems, importance of mobile network. And I know countries such as Kenya have been very efficient and of such mobile wallets. Mobile wallets being very effective to drive, such as transfer of in Lesotho with the two operators, Vodacom and Econet. Some of our commercial banks that enable trade country. So I should highlight that to summarize, access in remote are allowing women-led businesses to be able to their business and have a wider in order to foster growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Molise, for highlighting these platforms and how they're being used in Lesotho, as well as highlighting that this access, especially for women-led and youth-led businesses, is giving them access to a wider audience. So I'll go back now to Ms. Nangula. In 2023, 86% of investment policy measures adopted by developing countries were more favorable to investors. We saw this in one of the presentations that, one of the slides that Amele presented. And from recent figures, we also see that Namibia is beginning to see benefits of consistent and strategic investment promotion efforts. Between 2021 and 2023, Namibia attracted about 73 billion in FDI flows, with approximately 45% coming from the oil and gas sector. What lessons can other African countries learn from Namibia to boost FDI in the renewable energy sector?
Thank you very much. So I think, of course, Namibia has learned a lot of lessons from our past successes and failures. There were a time just after independence when we were very good in attracting FDI. And then somewhere there, we really had a period of a slump. And I think we kind of needed to do a reset button and start over. There's a saying by John Maxwell, everything rises and falls on leadership. And I really believe that what we have here is leadership. Our late president, who passed away earlier this year and who started these reforms, was our first prime minister just after independence. And there's 3 keywords that he was always saying. He says, systems, institutions, and processes. Systems, institutions, and processes. Or you can put it in any other order, but that is the one thing that he said. And sometimes we've got investors that come here and then they want to see the president, and he will say, no, I don't see investors unless they have invested. Otherwise, I've got ministers that they speak to and so forth. So what are some of the things that I think worked for us? Of course, investors want predictability, they want clarity, they want stability, they want consistency. If they apply for something, they need to know when, what will happen, how, and what are the expected outcomes, and what do I need to know to be more certain. When we don't have that clarity and we don't have that consistency in our institutions, in our processes, in our systems, then it is challenging for the investors to navigate. And I think that is sometimes some of the challenges that investors find what we hear in our African countries is that sometimes the systems, the processes, the related outcomes are not consistent and they are not predictable. And I think that is really what was emphasized by our late president. And of course, other things that I think I said, I have put them earlier, whether it is about strategic partnerships. But the other point that our late president did, especially when he took his second office in March of 2020, he brought in people that have got private sector knowledge. So he realized that he has got a government that is very knowledgeable when it comes to policy and designing of policy. And we have always been accused as Namibia saying, we know how to design policy. We have got brilliant policies. We are not so good at implementation. And I think, therefore, what he wanted to do is how do we implement these policies? By bringing in people who understand how to speak to investors. They have got experience of working in the private sector. So what he then did is really bring in quite a number of people. So somebody who used to be the governor of the Bank of Namibia became the Minister of Finance. Somebody who was actually a leader of Old Mutual Africa became the governor of the bank. I was the country senior partner of PwC in Namibia and a part of the leadership of Southern Africa, and he brought me in the position where I am. He had another chartered accountant who was leading Allen Gray Asset Manager as his economic advisor, and then a few other people that he brought in. Somebody who was also a previous governor of the bank and leading economic planning as the Minister of Mines and Energy. And then, of course, that is not taking away the number of politically experienced policy makers who were in the government. So what he realized is he needed to inject new ways of thinking that understand private sector operations, and then saying, okay, we have got these policies. Yes, review the policies. Let us reform where necessary. But at the same time, we want you to tell us, what does the private sector think? How do they operate? How can we work with them and make sure that our environment is really, really enabling? Therefore, leadership, leadership, and leadership. And then, of course, systems, institutions, and processes. That is what our leader did. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nangola. I think you summarized it very well at the beginning with that quote about everything rises and falls with leadership. And thank you for sharing a little bit of the details in terms of what was done with the systems, processes, and institutions in Namibia to achieve the success that you have so far experienced. So I'd like to thank Mr. Molise and Ms. Nangola for this panel discussion. I would like to open up the floor. I see there have been a couple of questions in the chat, some of which have been responded to, but I'd like to open up the floor for about 2 or 3 questions, and you could address them either to Amelia, who made the presentation, or to any one of the panelists. We have about 9 minutes to go, and I'd like to keep within that time frame. So if there is anybody who would like to ask a question to either the presenter or the panelists, please just raise your hand. I should be able to see it here. I'm opening up the floor for this. Do we have any questions from the floor? So there is a question in the chat from Jonathan Sawal. I hope I pronounced that well. And I think this is maybe for Amelia. What are your concrete proposals for FDI increase in the future?
Can you hear me well? Yes. That's the $1 million question. Can you hear me well, Judith?
Yes, we can hear you, Amelia.
Well, thank you so much. I think this is the pertinent question, and that's why every year when we do the World Investment Report, we want to focus on one area that could be crucial to achieve that goal of attracting FDI. I mean, we need to prioritize sustainable development. This is key. And one bottleneck that we have found is the limitations in country to have 5 lines of bankable projects. And here I want to steal our dear speaker from Namibia, 3 issues: systems, processes, and institutions. And that's why we have a proposal on that, a global compact to address institutional constraints and to help countries to prepare bankable projects to attract investment. Countries need to have the priorities right, There are many instruments that could help. The national determined contributions is a key instrument that for the energy transition. We are going towards COP30, where all the NDCs will have to be updated. Last year, we showed that of the big universe of developing countries, only 40 countries had identified the investment needs for the energy transition. And out of them, only 17 had identified where that money should come from, whether private sector, PPPs, public-private partnerships, international financial institutions. So national planning is important. Having the right institutional framework and instilling again with processes, system, and institution, because we need, I mean, it's like any economic determinant, institutional determinants are important. So we have presented a sort of policy guidance and compass that addresses how different international organizations can work together, but also how the private and public sector can work together, because there are sectors that still are highly protected or it's very difficult for investors to go in. Sustainable infrastructure and sustainable development is costly. It has a high risk. So we need to help countries de-risk in investment. So national policies are crucial, transparency is crucial, but also international support. Development is a long-term process, and we need to strengthen institutions and also how international investment policies can help vis-a-vis the multilateral trading system. So it's a compact that looks at both national and international efforts and support from different institutions and partnerships, making the partnerships work for developing countries.
Thank you very much, Amelia. I'd like to give an opportunity to Ms. Nangola and Mr. Molise if they have any final remarks before we close this panel session.
From my side, I think I've been covered. Thank you for the opportunity. Of course, we will continue to read the report for Namibia. And I think this was a brilliant session. Thank you very much to Antrad and Amelia, Stefania, and the team. And thank you, Judith.
Thank you, Ms. Nangola. Mr. Molise?
Thank you very much. Side, maybe just to what was highlighted on the question, done to attract more FDI. Most critical issue is for prepared and the only way prepared is ensuring that we have the financial instruments to unlock these for FDI in our countries. We can never overemphasize the importance of project preparation, instruments that de-risk projects and drive them to bankability, because FDI that would want to ensure that we have projects that show on investment and that show that issue of sustainability. Always when we talk about FDI in our countries, ensure how our domestic investors, we can never have grow without the local private that has been enabled to partner with sustainability. That is what I will. Thanks.
So thank you very much, Mr. Molise, and thank you, Ms. Nangola, for sharing your experiences from Namibia and Lesotho and for joining this panel discussion. I think it has really enriched the discussions this afternoon. To all our participants, I would like to inform you that we will share the presentation and a recording of the webinar either later today or next week. And I'd like to hand over now to Amelia for some closing remarks. And as part of those closing remarks, I'll just read one other question here in the chat box about how do you look on the planned multilateral investment court by the UNCITRAL? So with that, as well as your closing remarks, and we can bring this event to an end. So over to you, Amelia.
Thank you. Can you repeat the question on UNCITRAL? Sorry, I didn't get it.
How do you look on the planned multilateral investment court by UNCITRAL?
Thank you so much for the question. Basically, we have what we call in UNCTAD the Investment Policy Hub, where we focus on bilateral and international investment treaties, and we analyze what is the impact for developing countries. We don't take part in big multilateral cases. I mean, we work on mostly on developing countries and member states as per demand. So our role is analyze and provide policy guidance and support through different mechanisms, including the G20 working group for trade and development. So for investment, trade, and development. So we don't get involved in cases, but we do provide support and guidance to developing countries in their reform of the international investment treaties and agreements and capacity building and so on. Just to close, because I think you have been very patient, and thanks for the great questions and to the great speakers. Just on the issue of investment to Africa, I mean, we saw the trends, but we believe that foreign investment in clear energy can boost sustainability momentum in the region. We had some of the poster children of these processes. We had Namibia, we had Kenya, we had some of the leaders representing the region. Planning is crucial, and identifying what are the reforms pockets that need to be addressed. In the overall framework, digital government can tackle some of the root cause of low investment, not all of them, but it's a great starting point. And as we heard from the speaker, transparency and institutional frameworks are important. We at UNCTAD advocate for a bottom-up approach, and where implementation of digital governance is a natural complement for investment policy. We have to remember the whole ecosystem of investment policy. We have different ministers. Some countries have apex institutions that manage the process. It's important to work with your investment promotion agencies. They are not policy makers, they are policy takers, but they are your open door, open window towards investors. So having an ecosystem that includes all players is important. Now, just to conclude, we have our digital tools for business and investment facilitation launched by UNCTAD and supported by UNCTAD, includes 60 countries, is operational in 60 countries. Looking forward, we want to continue to support developing countries in collaboration with other international organizations. And basically to look at the opportunities, how to maximize the benefits of digital governance for the promotion of investment. And as our Secretary General said the day of the launch, is not only about attracting the financial resources, but about improving human capital, technology, and institutional quality in recipient countries. Thank you very much. I think there is a hand. I don't know if it's an older hand, but I leave it to the moderator to close.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question. Emmanuel Opoku, I work at the OECPS Secretariat. I wanted to find out why UNCTAD has not been publishing exit issues on exit arbitration in terms of where developing countries are featured. And of late, we have not seen any sort of UNCTAD publication. Okay,
I'm sorry. I think we reached the limit. But if you look to our investment policy monitors and the investment loss navigators, we have a very comprehensive, updated universe of policy measures and issues related to international investment treaties and bilateral investment treaty. In addition to the World Investment Report, we launch periodically the investment policy monitors, looking both one for national policies and other for international. So all these issues that are relevant to our work program are published there. I think I don't want to forget, but it's a good question. Judith, over to you, and Diane, over to you. And thank you very much, colleagues, for the great event.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Ameria, the team in Geneva, and all the organizers of this session. But before we close, can we put on our cameras just for a picture? Please, if you can just put on the cameras and then we do a group picture. Good, yeah. So thank you. We shall keep connected. As we mentioned, the full report is available online, and you are also available if you have any comment, questions. Feel free to reach out to UNCTAD, either the regional office or our colleagues in Geneva. So we are here to provide more information, update on everything related to this report. Thank you so much. Have a very nice day.
Thank you. And just
Thank you,
a
everybody.
final point. The overview is going to be produced in French and different languages soon, but the press releases are in all official UN languages already online, and I pasted it in the chat. Thank you very much and have a fantastic day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.